Have you ever defended yourself so intensely that people began wondering whether the accusation might be true? Someone makes a small comment about you. You correct it immediately. They repeat the story with one new detail, so you send evidence. Another person joins the conversation. You explain the timeline, challenge the motive, and demand fairness. Soon, the original issue almost disappears. What remains is an image of two people fighting. You may be right about every fact, but every response gives the conflict another audience, another chapter, and another reason to survive. Why does fighting every attack sometimes turn the attacker into your equal? I'm Sarah, and this is WiseMind Stories. In the 48 Laws of Power, conflict receives some of Robert Greene's most severe advice. Law 9 says to win through actions rather than argument. Law 15 says to crush an enemy completely. Law 22 presents surrender as a tactic. And Law 42 tells us to identify the central source of a group's aggression. These laws can sound ruthless because they were written through stories of courts, wars, and political survival. Modern life requires a different ethical boundary. We are not trying to destroy people. We are trying to stop destructive patterns without allowing conflict to remake our character. By the end of this episode, you will understand why public defense often strengthens an attack, how a small concession can create strategic room, and what it means to end a conflict at its source rather than feeding every symptom. Let's begin with Jonah. Jonah Reed worked for a regional logistics company called Meridian Freight. He was calm, analytical, and trusted by senior management. After 6 years, he was promoted to lead a major warehouse modernization project. The other leading candidate had been Malcolm Shaw. Malcolm was popular. He had worked at Meridian longer than Jonah, knew nearly everyone on the warehouse floor, and could turn an ordinary complaint into a story that made the entire break room laugh. When the promotion was announced, Malcolm shook Jonah's hand. "You deserve it," he said. 2 weeks later, the comments began. At first, they sounded harmless. Malcolm joked that Jonah's schedules looked perfect because Jonah never spent enough time on the floor. He told one supervisor that the modernization plan had been designed for executives, not workers. When an equipment delay occurred, he said, "This is what happens when spreadsheets start running warehouses." Jonah heard about each comment from someone else. He decided to correct the record. At the next team meeting, he showed that he had spent more than 40 hours interviewing warehouse staff. He explained why the equipment delay came from the supplier. He described every safety improvement included in the new plan. The presentation was factual and thorough. Malcolm listened, then said, "No one questioned your effort, Jonah. People are just concerned that you don't like being challenged." Several people looked down. Jonah felt the trap close. If he continued defending himself, he would prove he disliked challenge. If he stopped, Malcolm's claims would remain unanswered. So Jonah did what many intelligent people do when they feel misunderstood. He produced more information. He sent weekly emails documenting decisions. He replied to rumors individually. When a supervisor repeated a false claim, Jonah corrected him in front of the group. Each response was reasonable. Together, they changed his reputation. People began describing Jonah as tense. Meetings became cautious because employees feared becoming part of the dispute. Senior leaders no longer saw a modernization project. They saw conflict between Jonah and Malcolm. Malcolm's status increased. By arguing with him repeatedly, Jonah had turned informal criticism into an ongoing contest between two leaders. Law 9 explains why actions often persuade more effectively than argument. An argument asks people to accept your interpretation. A visible result allows them to reach the conclusion themselves. Words can be challenged by more words. A functioning system, a met deadline, or a changed pattern is harder to debate. But Jonah felt he could not wait for results. The rumors were damaging the project now. That was when Lena, the company's safety director, asked him to walk through the warehouse after the evening shift. She had watched the conflict grow. "How many people have repeated something Malcolm said?" she asked. "At least 8. "And how many separate arguments are you trying to win?" Jonah understood the question. He had been fighting 8 messengers while the source gained influence from every response. Lena continued. "You are treating this like a debate about facts. Malcolm is organizing a story about who represents the workers. Every time you defend yourself from behind a screen, you help him tell it. That is Law 42. Strike at the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter." The language is violent, but the strategic insight is simple. Group behavior often has a center, a person, incentive, rumor, or unresolved grievance that keeps reproducing it. If you fight every expression separately, the source remains untouched. In a family, 5 relatives may repeat the same pressure because one powerful person defines what loyalty means. In an office, several colleagues may resist a change because one respected employee converts uncertainty into opposition. Online, thousands of comments may trace back to one emotionally compelling distortion. Do not confuse the size of the echo with the number of original voices. Jonah needed to understand what gave Malcolm power. He stopped replying to second-hand comments. Instead, he spent 3 mornings on the warehouse floor without giving a presentation. He asked employees which parts of the modernization plan worried them and wrote down the answers. He discovered something uncomfortable. Malcolm had exaggerated many claims, but one criticism was valid. Jonah's implementation schedule gave experienced forklift operators only 2 days to train on a new routing system. Management had approved the schedule, but workers believed the change would make them look incompetent while learning in public. Jonah's first instinct was to explain why 2 days should be enough. Then he remembered Law 22. Use surrender as a tactic. Surrender does not always mean accepting defeat. Sometimes it means yielding the position that costs you little, so you can stop defending the position that weakens you. At the next meeting, Jonah said, "The training schedule is too aggressive. I built it around the installation deadline instead of the learning experience. That was my mistake, and we're changing it." The room relaxed. Malcolm had expected resistance. A clear concession removed the strongest piece of evidence supporting his larger story. Jonah expanded training to 5 days and invited 2 respected operators to help redesign it. He did not ask them to endorse him. He gave them real responsibility. Then he acted. The first phase launched with fewer errors than the old system. Employees who had been skeptical began explaining the new process to others. The visible result did what Jonah's emails could not, but one problem remained. Malcolm continued telling people that the performance numbers were manipulated. At this point, patience alone would have become avoidance. This is where Law 15 must be translated carefully. To crush, a person is destructive and often illegal. Humiliation creates memory, resentment, and future retaliation. But a recurring attack must sometimes be ended completely at the level of access, ambiguity, and consequence. Partial boundaries invite repeated testing. If someone lies about you, and each lie produces only a private request to stop, the pattern learns that the cost is low. Ending the conflict means making the boundary unambiguous and changing the conditions that allow the harm to continue. Jonah documented the exact claims, dates, and witnesses. He reviewed the performance data with the finance and safety teams so the numbers could be independently verified. Then he met Malcolm privately with a human resources representative present. He did not accuse Malcolm of jealousy. He did not review every insult. He addressed one behavior. You have repeatedly told employees that the project data is manipulated. The data has been independently reviewed. If you have evidence, present it through the formal process. If you do not, the claim must stop. Repeating it again will be treated as misconduct. Malcolm tried to turn the meeting into a discussion of Jonah's personality. Jonah did not follow him. He returned to the behavior, the evidence, and the consequence. For the first time, the conflict had an edge. Malcolm stopped making the claim publicly. Several weeks later, he requested a transfer to another site. Some of his closest allies remained skeptical of Jonah, but the organized campaign dissolved because its central story no longer had a protected source. Jonah did not celebrate Malcolm's departure. He also did not continue attacking him after the threat ended. The purpose of ending a conflict is not to keep enjoying the victory. It is to recover the energy the conflict was consuming. There is a profound difference between justice and emotional completion. Justice can establish facts, boundaries, repair, or consequence. Emotional completion is the fantasy that the other person will finally understand your pain, admit your goodness, and feel exactly the right amount of regret. That fantasy keeps many conflicts alive after practical safety has been restored. Jonah could not force Malcolm to believe he had been fair. He could protect the project, correct the valid problem, and stop the false claim. That was enough. Where might you be trying to win an argument that your behavior could make irrelevant? Perhaps an ex-partner says you will never change. You write paragraphs describing your growth. Living differently for a year would say more. Perhaps a colleague claims you are unreliable. A perfect counterargument may not matter. 3 months of visible, documented follow-through might. Perhaps a family member calls your boundary selfish. Endless explanation teaches them that the boundary remains open for negotiation. Consistent behavior teaches them where it is. Action is slower than argument. That is why it is more difficult to fake. Public conflict is seductive because it gives immediate emotional rewards. You post the perfect response. Friends praise it. The other person looks foolish for an hour. Your nervous system interprets attention as progress. But an audience changes the goal of disagreement. In private, 2 people can revise a position. In public, revision may feel like losing status. Each side begins speaking not to solve the problem, but to preserve an identity in front of witnesses. That is why some conflicts become less honest as more people learn about them. Before responding publicly, ask 3 questions. Who actually needs this information? What concrete harm continues if I say nothing? And what outcome can this response realistically create? If the only answer is, people will see that I am right, pause. Public agreement is unstable protection. The same crowd that validates you today may reward the next dramatic version tomorrow. There are situations where silence is unsafe. False professional claims may require a documented correction. Harassment, abuse, financial misconduct, or threats may require formal reporting and outside support. Strategic restraint should never become a demand that a harmed person quietly absorb danger. The point is to choose the channel that can change the condition. A public argument may create noise, while a formal record creates consequence. A family debate may repeat for years, while one enforced boundary changes access. 10 emotional messages may do less than one lawyer, mediator, manager, or trusted authority with the ability to act. Power asks not only, what response expresses how I feel? It asks, where can a response actually alter what happens next? Jonah became effective when he stopped using every room as a courtroom. He placed facts where facts could be verified. consequences where consequences could be enforced, and emotion where it could be processed without running the strategy. That separation did not make him less human. It prevented the person attacking him from deciding when, where, and how every feeling had to be expressed. He regained authorship over both his response and the future of the work. Use a 4-part tool called STOP. S. Show the result. Ask what observable action would weaken the accusation without requiring agreement. Build evidence through behavior, systems, and independent verification. Do not perform for the attacker. Create reality other people can inspect. T. Target the source. Identify what keeps reproducing the conflict. Is it one person, one incentive, one channel, or one unresolved truth? Do not spend equal energy on every echo. O. Offer a tactical concession. Find the part of the criticism that is true or inexpensive to yield. Admit it clearly, correct it visibly. A real concession can remove fuel from a dishonest attack. It also prevents power from turning into pride. P. Put an end to the channel. State the boundary, evidence, and consequence. Change access where necessary. Use formal systems when safety, harassment, money, or reputation is at risk. Do not threaten consequences you will not enforce. And do not continue punishing after the channel is closed. Now ask yourself, which accusation keeps receiving more life from your attempts to destroy it? Are you arguing with followers while avoiding the source? What small truth could you admit that would make the larger distortion weaker? And if the conflict ended tomorrow, would you know how to stop fighting? Or has the battle become part of your identity? Power in conflict is not measured by how much damage you can cause. It is measured by how little of yourself the conflict is allowed to own. In the next episode, we will move beneath visible behavior. How do you know who you are really dealing with? What hidden need drives a person's resistance? And how can you read emotional pressure without using another person's wounds against them? Episode 9 is called Read the Person Behind the Mask.